You know what really grinds my gears about these Xenos? Captain Sarah Chen drummed her fingers on the pristine conference table, her coffee mug leaving yet another ring on the supposedly indestructible surface. They think we're adorable. Commander Jackson looked up from his datapad, raising an eyebrow. Adorable? That's what's bothering you? Not the trade restrictions or the technology embargoes or the fact that they literally pat us on the head when we make scientific breakthroughs they achieved millennia ago? Yes, Jackson. Adorable. Sarah took an aggressive sip of her coffee. Because that's the root of all of it. They think we're some kind of cosmic puppy that needs to be house-trained. Have you seen the latest Galactic Council briefing? They're calling us an endearing young species still learning to navigate the complexities of interstellar society. The conference room of the UES Tenacity wasn't exactly the most impressive setting for this conversation. It was standard military issue, all clean lines and utilitarian design. But it had become the unofficial complaint department for humanity's finest. The coffee stains were practically archaeological layers at this point, each one marking another session of humanity's collective frustration with their place in the galactic community. At least they're not calling us precious anymore. Lieutenant Wei chimed in from her corner, where she was supposedly monitoring deep space communications, but was actually playing Tetris. Remember that diplomatic incident last year? Sarah groaned. Don't remind me. The Zixathraxian ambassador literally tried to pinch my cheeks. My cheeks, Jackson. I have 4 combat medals and a PhD in xenopolitics, and he treated me like his favorite grandchild. To be fair, Jackson said, hiding a smirk behind his own coffee mug, you are kind of short by galactic standards. I will end you, Jackson. I will end you, and I will make it look like an accident, and the aliens will probably coo about how cute my attempt at murder was. The thing about humanity's position in the galactic community was that it was complicated. When humans had finally cracked FTL travel and burst onto the interstellar scene, they'd expected either independence or warfare. What they got instead was adoption by about 50 different elder species, who all seemed to think humans were the most delightful thing since sliced bread. A concept they found charmingly primitive, by the way. But you know what the worst part is? Sarah continued, now pacing the room with the energy of someone who had definitely had too much coffee. They're not even wrong, technically. We are young. We are inexperienced, but that doesn't mean we're incapable. Speaking of capability, Wei interrupted, suddenly sitting up straight and actually paying attention to her console. We might have a situation. The room's atmosphere shifted instantly from casual complaint session to professional alertness. Sarah was at Wei's station in 3 steps, coffee forgotten. Talk to me. Pirates, the nasty kind. They're hitting the Proxima colony supply route again, but something's different this time. Wei's fingers flew over her console, bringing up tactical displays. They're using banned weapons, Class 4 gravitational disruptors. Those are illegal in every civilized system, Jackson said, moving to peer over Wei's other shoulder. Even the Council takes those seriously. Yeah, well, apparently these guys didn't get the memo. Wei highlighted a series of energy signatures. 3 ships, heavily armed, and they're not even trying to hide their weapon signatures. It's like they want everyone to know they're using the big guns. Sarah's expression shifted from annoyed to calculating. The Council's response time to pirates in human space is what, usually? About 6 hours, standard, Jackson replied. They have to convene, discuss the situation, determine the appropriate response level, file the proper forms. And how long until those ships reach the colony's supply vessels? Wei checked her readings. At current speed, 43 minutes. A slow, dangerous smile spread across Sarah's face. You know what? I think it's time we showed our adorable little claws. Wei, get me a channel to Fleet Command. Jackson, begin combat preparations. Let's see how cute they think we are when we're kicking their assets. What happened next would go down in galactic history as the incident that changed everything, though various species had different names for it. The Zixathraxians called it the Awakening of the Little Ones. The Valurians termed it the Day of Surprising Competence. Humans, with their characteristic bluntness, simply called it the day we got tired of this shit. The UES Tenacity, despite being a supposedly primitive human vessel, had a few tricks up its sleeve. While the elder species had been patting humans on the head, humanity had been studying, adapting, and most importantly, innovating. They didn't have the most advanced technology, but they had something better. Creativity and a burning desire to prove themselves. Battle stations, Sarah commanded, now sitting in her captain's chair with perfect posture and a gleam in her eye that would have worried anyone who knew her well. And someone get me the Council on the line. I want them to see this. The bridge crew moved with practiced efficiency, and within moments, the holographic presence of the Galactic Council's emergency response team materialized in the center of the bridge. 7 different species were represented, each looking as dignified and slightly condescending as ever. "Ah, young Captain Chen," the Zixathraxian counselor began, his tone dripping with grandfatherly indulgence. "We received your alert about the pirate situation. Please maintain your position, and we will dispatch appropriate forces to handle this unfortunate incident." "Thank you for your concern, Counselor," Sarah replied, her smile sharp enough to cut diamond. "But I'm not calling to request assistance. I'm calling to inform you that we're about to handle this situation ourselves. I believe the proper diplomatic term is heads up." The council members exchanged looks of varying degrees of alarm and amusement. The Valerian representative actually chuckled. "My dear, while your enthusiasm is commendable, these pirates are using Class 4 gravitational disruptors. Such weapons are far beyond your current technological level to counter." "Oh, I'm aware," Sarah said, still smiling. "Wei, show them what we've been working on." Lieutenant Wei's fingers danced across her console, and suddenly the tactical display showed something new, something that made several council members lean forward in surprise. "Is that—" the Mechalon representative began, their optical sensors whirring as they adjusted focus. "Quantum field manipulation?" Sarah finished for them. "Why, yes it is. Turns out when you tell humans they can't have certain technology, we get really creative about working around it. We can't neutralize Class 4 gravitational disruptors directly, but we can certainly mess with the space they're trying to disrupt." "This is unprecedented," the Zixathraxian counselor sputtered. "You haven't submitted any of this technology for review and approval." "Funny thing about that," Jackson chimed in, not even trying to hide his grin. "The technology submission guidelines specifically state that innovations must be complete and fully understood before submission. We're still technically in the experimental phase. Been in the experimental phase for about 3 years now. Lots of paperwork, you understand." The pirates, meanwhile, were approaching their target with the confidence of predators who knew they had the biggest teeth in the ocean. They were about to learn that teeth weren't everything. "Target solutions locked," Wei reported. "Quantum field generators at full capacity. Ready on your order, Captain." Sarah leaned forward in her chair, her expression now serious. "Council members, I invite you to observe how humanity handles threats to its people. You might want to take notes. Fire." What happened next was, in the words of one junior council aide who would later become famous for his description, like watching a butterfly punch out a heavyweight boxer. The Tenacity's experimental quantum fields didn't just neutralize the gravitational disruptors. They turned them into very expensive paperweights. The pirates, suddenly finding their superweapons about as useful as screen doors on a submarine, did what pirates tend to do when faced with actual resistance. They tried to run. "Oh no you don't," Sarah muttered. "Wei, hit them with the other thing." "The other thing? But Captain, that's still highly experimental. And this is a perfect field test opportunity. Do it." The other thing turned out to be a specially modified tractor beam that didn't so much grab the pirate ships as it did tangle them in a web of contradictory spatial vectors. The result was something that looked like a cat's cradle made of light, with 3 very frustrated pirate vessels stuck in the middle. What is this?" one of the pirate captains demanded over an open channel, their translator barely keeping up with what appeared to be some very creative cursing. "This," Sarah replied, broadcasting on all frequencies, "is humanity being done with everyone's shit. Council members, we'll be happy to deliver these pirates to your justice system. Once we're done documenting every single violation of galactic law they've committed, thoroughly, with extensive appendices." The council chamber had gone very quiet, the kind of quiet that happens when several very old, very wise beings suddenly realize they might have miscalculated something rather important. "Captain Chen," the Zixathraxian counselor said slowly, "I believe we may have been somewhat hasty in our assessment of human capabilities." "Oh, this?" Sarah gestured at the still struggling pirate ships. "This is nothing. Would you like to know what else we've been working on while you've been treating us like precocious children? Because I have charts. I have so many charts. Jackson's been helping me prepare a presentation for the last 6 months. I used animations and everything," Jackson added helpfully. "There's even a section about how we reversed engineered that simple civilian transport technology you gave us and turned it into something that would make your engineers cry." The next 6 hours were some of the most enlightening in recent galactic history. Sarah's presentation, delivered while the pirates sat helplessly trapped in their ships watching their captors essentially conduct a tech show and tell, covered everything from weapons innovation to environmental engineering. It turned out humans had been very, very busy during their developmental phase. And this, Sarah said, showing the final slide, is our proposal for updating humanity's status in the galactic community. We're not asking for elder species status. We know we're young. But we are asking for recognition as equals. Partners. Because the next time there's a threat to galactic peace, you might want us on your side. The council members had long since stopped looking condescending and started taking notes. The Mechalon representative had actually crashed and rebooted twice during the presentation. This is unprecedented, the Valurian counselor admitted. No species has ever advanced so quickly, or in such unusual ways. That's because you keep expecting everyone to follow the same developmental path you did, Sarah explained. But humans, we're like water. Block our path and we don't stop, we just find another way around. Usually several ways, some of which defy physics in creative ways that we're still trying to understand ourselves. And if we were to deny this proposal? The Zixothraxian asked, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer. Sarah's smile returned, sharp as ever. Then we'll keep doing exactly what we've been doing. Innovating, advancing, finding loopholes in your regulations that are technically legal, but give your safety inspectors anxiety attacks, and we'll keep submitting paperwork. So much paperwork. Several council members visibly winced at that last threat. If there was one thing the elder species had learned about humans, it was their terrifying ability to weaponize bureaucracy when properly motivated. I move, the Mechalon representative said, their vocals still slightly glitchy from their earlier crashes, that we immediately begin proceedings to revise humanity's status in the galactic community. Seconded, the Valurian added quickly, before they figure out how to turn paperwork into an actual weapon. Too late, Wei muttered under her breath, quickly closing a very interesting file on her console. The vote was unanimous, which was fortunate, because Sarah had another 100 slides ready just in case. And Jackson had gotten really creative with the animations on those ones. As the council members signed off to begin the immediate process of upgrading humanity's status, Sarah finally allowed herself to relax slightly in her chair. Well, she said to her crew, that was fun. Wei, how are our pirate friends doing? Still stuck, still cursing, and I think one of them is trying to write a strongly worded letter of complaint to the council about us. Perfect. Jackson, please inform them that as per Regulation 47B subsection 12, all formal complaints must be submitted in triplicate, with appropriate notarization from at least 3 different species, and a complete molecular breakdown of any writing implements used in the process. There is no Regulation 47B subsection 12, Jackson pointed out. They don't know that, and by the time they figure it out, we'll have created one, possibly an entire new regulatory code, just because we can. The pirates, as it turned out, surrendered unconditionally within the hour. Not because of the weapons, or the technology, or even the threat of facing galactic justice. No, they surrendered because Sarah had started reading them excerpts from her proposed amendments to the Galactic Regulatory Framework regarding proper piracy documentation procedures. Word spread quickly through the galactic community. Humans, it seemed, were not just adorable anymore. They were adorable and terrifying. A combination that led to a lot of rapid policy revisions and several very interesting cultural exchange programs. The Galactic Council, in what might have been the fastest bureaucratic action in recorded history, officially upgraded humanity's status within 3 standard days. They also, somewhat nervously, approved every single technology patent humanity had been sitting on, just in case. Sarah celebrated by adding another coffee stain to the conference table. You know what really grinds my gears now? She asked Jackson a few days later, during their regular complaint session. What's that? They're still calling us adorable. But now they say it the way people talk about things that might explode if you look at them wrong. Progress? Progress. And somewhere in the vast expanse of space, several elder species were hastily updating their diplomatic handbooks. The entry for humans now read, "Approach with caution, may appear harmless, are not. Will drown you in paperwork while inventing new laws of physics if provoked. Surprisingly good at making coffee." Sarah would have been proud, especially about the coffee part. In the wake of humanity's dramatic status upgrade, life in the galactic community got interesting. The kind of interesting that makes historians reach for their strongest drinks while trying to document it. You want me to what? Sarah stared at the holographic message floating above her desk, coffee mug frozen halfway to her lips. They want you to give a presentation at the annual Galactic Innovation Summit, Jackson repeated, looking far too amused for someone who was supposedly her second-in-command. Apparently, you're now considered an expert on alternative technological development pathways. I created a diplomatic incident and threatened them with paperwork. Yes, and they found it fascinating. The mechanoids particularly want to understand how we managed to develop quantum field manipulation while supposedly focusing all our research efforts on improving coffee makers. The truth was, humanity's recent revelation of their actual technological capabilities had created something of a stir in the galactic scientific community. Turns out that when you spend a few decades pretending to be less advanced than you are, people get really interested in how you pulled it off. Fine, Sarah sighed, finally taking that sip of coffee. But I'm not wearing those ridiculous formal robes they always try to make us wear at these things. Last time I looked like a disco ball had a baby with a curtain. Already handled, Wei called from her station. I submitted a 15-page document explaining how human formal attire is culturally significant and cannot be substituted without causing severe diplomatic strain. Also, I might have implied that our uniforms are somehow connected to our quantum field technology. They're not, though. They don't know that. And after your last presentation, they're not willing to risk finding out the hard way. The summit was being held on Centauri Prime, one of the more prestigious neutral worlds in the galaxy. As the Tenacity approached the space station where the conference was being hosted, Sarah couldn't help but notice how differently they were being treated this time around. Captain Chen, the docking control officer's voice carried a note of what might have been nervousness. We've prepared a special berth for your vessel, with, extra clearance, just in case you need to test anything. Thank you, Sarah replied smoothly. Though I should warn you that our current experiments do occasionally cause localized violations of the laws of thermodynamics. Nothing serious, just a bit of light entropy manipulation. There was a long pause. I'll make a note of that, Captain. Jackson waited until the channel was closed before turning to her. We're not actually manipulating entropy, are we? No. But I've been wanting to use that line ever since they made us sit through that patronizing lecture on basic physics last year. The conference center was packed with representatives from every major species in the galaxy. The main hall, usually arranged in a strict hierarchy with elder species at the front and younger races relegated to the back, had been hastily rearranged into a more egalitarian circle. Sarah noticed with satisfaction that the human section was positioned directly opposite the main speaker's podium. Is that a coffee machine? Wei whispered, pointing to an elaborate device set up near their seats. Top-of-the-line human model, one of the organizers explained proudly. We thought you might appreciate having your traditional stimulant available during the presentations. Sarah examined the machine with professional interest. That's a nice gesture, but you do realize this is a commercial model, right? Wait until you see what we've done with the military-grade versions. The organizer's expression suggested they weren't sure if she was joking. That was becoming a common look among the elder species lately. The summit opened with the traditional ceremonies, though Sarah noticed they'd significantly shortened the usual acknowledgement of elder wisdom section. Instead, there was a new segment about embracing diverse developmental paths. Progress, indeed. Then it was time for her presentation. Sarah stood at the podium, took a sip of her perfectly prepared coffee, and smiled at the assembled delegates. Ladies, gentlemen, and beings of indeterminate or fluctuating gender, she began. Today, I'm going to tell you about how humanity turned your restrictions into the galaxy's most productive research and development program. But first, let me tell you about something we call malicious compliance. What followed was 3 hours of what would later be described in official records as an enlightening exposition on human innovation methodology, and in unofficial records as the day several elder species learned what anxiety feels like. Sarah explained in cheerful detail how humanity had taken every single restriction, regulation, and patronizing technological gift and turned them into opportunities. The banned weapons list had become a checklist of physics problems to solve. The restricted technology catalog had been treated as a challenge rather than a limitation. And that's why, she concluded, showing a slide that made several physicists' optical organs twitch. You should never tell humans something is impossible. We take it personally. The question and answer session that followed was chaotic, to say the least. But how did you maintain quantum coherence without access to advanced containment fields? One mechanoid demanded. Oh, we just sort of wrapped it in coffee steam. Turns out the molecular structure of a perfect espresso crema has some interesting properties when you look at it from the right angle. That's not possible, a Valurian physicist protested. Funny thing about impossible, Sarah replied, taking another sip of her coffee. It keeps moving every time we poke it hard enough. The Zixthraxian representative raised a trembling appendage. Are you saying that all this time, while we thought you were struggling with basic antimatter containment, we were using it to heat our coffee? Yes. The energy efficiency is terrible, but the taste is amazing. By the end of the day, 3 things had become clear to the galactic community. First, humans had not been developing technology along expected lines, because they had never seen the expected lines as anything but suggestions. Second, giving humans restrictions had essentially created a species-wide game of find the loophole, which they had turned into an art form. And third, nobody was quite sure whether Captain Sarah Chen was joking about the entropy manipulation anymore, and they were too afraid to ask. As they prepared to return to the Tenacity, Jackson reviewed the day's outcomes on his datapad. Well, that went better than expected, though I think you might have broken the mechanoid physicist when you started explaining our theories about using bureaucracy as a computational medium. To be fair, Wei added, that one actually works. Remember that time we used stacked requisition forms to calculate a faster-than-light trajectory? That was an accident, and you know it. We were just trying to justify the coffee budget. Sarah leaned back in her chair, adding a fresh coffee ring to her collection as she contemplated the implications. They do realize that teaching other species to think like humans might not have the effect they're hoping for, right? Oh, they've already had several emergency sessions about that possibility. Admiral Jones chuckled. But they've decided that the potential benefits outweigh the risks. Besides, as the Valurian representative put it, they cannot possibly be more destructively creative than they already are. Challenge accepted, Wei muttered under her breath. And that was how the UES Tenacity found itself converted into what was possibly the strangest educational institution in galactic history. They called it the Human Innovation and Methodological Practices Program, or HIMP for short. Sarah suspected someone in administration had done that on purpose. The first day of classes was interesting. Welcome to Human Problem Solving 101, Sarah announced to the assembled aliens in what had once been her ship's cargo bay. Today, we're going to start with a fundamental human concept, the coffee break. Excuse me. A mechanoid student raised their manipulator appendage. Our research indicates that coffee breaks are merely periods of biological maintenance and chemical stimulant consumption. How is this relevant to advanced problem solving? Sarah smiled. It was the kind of smile that made Jackson reach for the emergency protocols. Excellent question. Wei, would you care to demonstrate? Wei pulled up a holographic display of their latest quantum field equations. These, she explained, were mostly solved during coffee breaks. In fact, some of our best innovations have come from what we call coffee break physics, the practice of throwing increasingly ridiculous ideas at problems while caffeinated. But that's not how scientific advancement is supposed to work, protested a Valurian student. And that, Sarah said, pointing with her coffee mug, is exactly why you're here. Lesson 1, the phrase supposed to, is often the enemy of innovation. The curriculum they developed was unlike anything the galactic community had seen before. Instead of traditional lectures on physics and engineering, they had sessions like Creative Regulatory Interpretation, 201, Finding the Loophole, Advanced Coffee Break Theory, Practical Applications of Spite-Driven Development, Bureaucratic Warfare, Winning Through Paperwork, The Art of Asking what if until something explodes. The results were mixed, Captain, Jackson reported after the first month. The good news is that the mechanoid students have finally grasped the concept of thinking outside the box. The bad news is they're now questioning the fundamental nature of boxes. The Valurians have started submitting their homework in increasingly creative formats, Wei added. Yesterday's assignment came in the form of the interpretive dance about quantum entanglement. It was actually quite accurate. Sarah nodded sagely. And the Zixithraxians? They've formed a debate club dedicated to questioning every single regulation in the Galactic Code. They're currently on Regulation 47,392 and showing no signs of stopping. Perfect, Sarah said, adding another coffee stain to her table. They're learning. The real breakthrough came during what would later be known as the incident with the vending machine. One of the mechanoid students, inspired by human approaches to problem solving, had decided to improve the ship's food dispensers. The resulting creation not only violated several laws of thermodynamics, but somehow managed to produce better coffee than the official machine. How? Sarah asked, examining the steaming cup of perfectly brewed coffee that had technically been created through a process that shouldn't have been possible. I applied the human principle of, if it's stupid but it works, it isn't stupid, the mechanoid explained proudly. Also, I may have accidentally invented a new form of matter in the process. We're calling it quantum coffee. Sarah took a sip. It was, impossibly, the best coffee she'd ever had. You know what? I don't even want to know how you did it. This is exactly the kind of thing we've been trying to teach. Sometimes the best solutions are the ones that make senior scientists cry. Word of the program's unique success spread quickly through the galactic community. Soon there was a waiting list for enrollment that included some of the most prestigious scientific institutions in known space. You realize what we've done, right? Jackson asked one day, watching their students enthusiastically violate various laws of physics in increasingly creative ways. We've basically infected the galaxy with human thinking patterns. Consider it revenge for all those years they spent patting us on the head, Sarah replied. Besides, look how much fun they're having. She gestured to where a group of Valurians were collaborating with some mechanoids on what they claimed was a new form of FTL drive powered by bureaucratic paradoxes. It shouldn't have worked. It definitely shouldn't have worked. But somehow, they'd managed to create a prototype that not only functioned, but also automatically filed its own paperwork. The Galactic Council's reaction to the program's results was a masterpiece of diplomatic understatement. The Human Innovation and Methodological Practices program has exceeded all expectations, though perhaps not in ways we anticipated. Sarah kept that message framed on her wall, right next to the coffee stain that marked the day they'd officially turned the galaxy's most advanced species into chaos gremlins. You know what the best part is? She mused to her crew one evening. They still think we're adorable. But now it's because we've taught them how to weaponize that assumption. Indeed, reports were coming in from across the galaxy of former HIMP students applying their new skills in increasingly impressive ways. The mechanoids had developed a new form of computing that somehow ran on pure SAS. The Valurians had revolutionized their art scene by incorporating quantum uncertainty into their architecture, creating buildings that were simultaneously there and not there until someone complained about them. And the Zixthraxians? They'd turned their entire legal system into what they called a quantum bureaucracy, where regulations existed in a superposition of states until directly observed. Somehow it was more efficient than their old system. We've created monsters, Jackson observed proudly. No, Sarah corrected, adding yet another coffee stain to her conference table. We've created innovators. The monsters were already there. We just taught them how to have fun with it. Somewhere in the vast expanse of space, that pirate captain was still trying to file their complaint. They'd finally figured out what a number 2 pencil was, only to discover that the forms were now quantum locked and could only be filled out while drinking coffee that technically shouldn't exist. Sarah would have been proud, especially since it was her former students who'd come up with that particular innovation. The galaxy would never be the same. But then again, that had been the point all along. And in the depths of space, a new saying began to circulate among the species. Never underestimate a human with a coffee mug and a point to prove. They had no idea how right they were,